A little bit about my background is I was an evolutionist for most of my life because it was by default. I'd never seen another perspective. I was almost 40 before I saw the creationist perspective. And how did that happen? Came home from work one day and there was a package from my cousin, Carol, and her husband. And it was a 8-track, or a video VCR tape. You young kids don't know what that is. We plugged it in and we watched it in 2004, and it changed my life. Changed my family's life. It was The Age of the Earth by Kent Hovind. Anybody ever heard of Kent Hovind? Okay, he's got an army out there that he's impacted. And I realized that night that, you know, the Big Bang and the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and ape-like ancestors and Noah's Ark and dinosaurs, I could never put them together. Didn't make sense. And what I realized that night is we're not putting one puzzle together, we're putting 2 puzzles together. The key is to separate the pieces. Some are based on God's word and some are based on man's word. One of them's true and one of them's false. And I really enjoy helping people figure that one out. And so that opened the door to creation. That's when my education began, because that's when I started to see both sides of the issue. And then I could think. Other than that, I was being told what to think, and that's indoctrination. And so we started getting more and more of the videos. The kids were ages 3 and 5. No, they were older by that age. But we just kept on getting more and more information. And we saw Brian Young debate somebody at St. Cloud State. I don't know if he remembers that or not, but we helped him load up his books when he was all done, and he just slaughtered them. Just slaughtered them. And then I heard him speak at Onamia, Minnesota. He did a Saturday session. He went from 9 until 5, different talk the whole time with an hour lunch. It was just amazing. And we're having lunch, and he comes and sits down by my cousin and I, and we're talking. He goes, "Hey, you want my slides?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take your slides." And I had a thumb drive, and he gave me all his slides, and it just jump-started my ministry. And so you never know, you know, what something will do. That video that I received from my cousin has touched people all over the country, well, from here to Florida for sure. And so it's been a lot of fun. So you never know what some little thing could do in somebody's life. And so, yeah, so you can, Brian, he helped create this monster, Brian Young, so you can thank him for that. But tonight's talk is God's clues are everywhere. So what I'd like everybody to do is close your eyes. Just shut them. Okay, ready? All right. Now open them. All right, that's my son. Okay. Now, just the mere fact that you can see is a miracle. You think there's a little screen at the back of your eyes? No, there's sensors. You got all these light sensors that are sending these signals to your brain, and the brain's figuring out what those are to make that image. So what's back to, you know, what your brain's probably seeing is that static, and then your brain is decoding it to put that image there, which is just a miracle. You know, this sight is just incredible. How that comes about is amazing. And it says that humans have over 250 million photoreceptors with about 120 million rods and 6 million cones in each eye. And they're wired. And I heard Eric Hovind talking, and he was saying that the wires start growing towards each other, and they have to meet in the middle correctly for us to see. It's just incredibly complex. This isn't step by step. I mean, what good is half an eye? You know, that Darwin say if there's something out there that couldn't be put together in a stepwise fashion, his theory would fall apart. Well, the eye is it. You know, it should have fallen apart, but they don't like the alternative. So that's a sideways look. And what's really interesting is the eyes go to each hemisphere, the nerves go. But there was one girl, she was born without half a brain. She only had half her hemisphere was there. And the amazing thing was that the nerves for the eyes that should have gone to the empty one went to the good one. And she can see fine. The brain is incredibly complex. And Bob Enyart has this trachea challenge. Anybody ever heard of P.Z. Meyer? He's an outspoken evolutionist that, anyhow, it's the trachea challenge. He says, "Hey, PZ, can you show us how that, you see that muscle that goes through that loop and then comes back down? That's the trachea up in the upper right corner." He just says, you know, how did that evolve? You know, how, just framework, you know, how would that happen? You know, it's obviously designed. And I mentioned earlier, you know, if you only had what you thanked God for, what would you have today? And I said, like, when you wake up in the morning, you know, get up. That's my son. Does anybody know where we are? Has anybody ever been at that Hotel Marriott? Okay, this is the whole hotel with all the amenities. Anybody know where that is? Notice there's no car. The person, Kathy or Gloria probably knows. Where is it?
Boundary Waters.
There we go. Boundary Waters. You guys know the Boundary Waters? Notice there's no car there. You can't get there by car. There's no cars. There's no power lines. You get there by canoe. And so when you go there, you're just hoping that there's a tent that evolved, right? You just, all these millions of billions of years, there should be a tent and a popcorn popper, right? You know, everything, it should just evolve there, but you know, that never happens. This is our dining room. And behind my wife, you can see the washroom or the kitchen area. We got but none of that evolved. So how did we get it all there? Who'd like to portage that? And I go to be on vacation, so we just paddled as far as we could, and we set up camp, and then we did day trips. But we had everything, but you notice our kids aren't going to fit there, so they had to get there themselves, you know? And so, now this is what I'm going to teach the kids tomorrow. You know, when you see something, ask, you know, where'd that come from? Where did that boat come from? Came from a boat factory, right? Well, where'd that factory come from? Well, people made it. Well, where did the people come from? So all your life, little kids, be asking, where'd that come from? Where did the loons come from? It all comes from God. If you keep asking that question long enough, it's going to be God, or they're going to have to admit they don't know. And it's like, if you don't know, I don't want your faith. That's pretty weak. And to get it all there, yeah, we had 4 people in the front of that. But that was, and then on the way home, we're listening to Adventures in Odyssey, and it's the flood one with Noah, and it's just a downpour on us. It's just, oh, that's good anemones. All right, everybody touch your belly button. This has to do with Mother's Day. At one day, you know, right now, you can breathe air and it goes to your lungs and it circulates around your body. At one point in time, that belly button was hooked up to that placenta, to your mother, and you were living in fluid. The lungs going to the heart weren't going to do any good. You got all that nutrition and oxygen from the placenta. So that's all hooked up. So how do you go from living in fluid to living in air like that? It's a miracle upon miracles. This is from Dr. Cazell, and he spoke at our TCCSA, Twin Cities Creation Science Association meeting, and he's just great. And you know what? You guys can listen to it too. Go in and get the links. A lot of these are Zoomed, and so he's talking, and he's a doctor. And when he was born, he was premature, so they put him in a shoebox in a light, and I kept him warm. And he's talking about all these amazing things. And he's diagramming and using all these big words, and I just go, wow. I'm glad he knows what's going on. But in a nutshell, when they cut the umbilical cord, the pressure drops. So there's a valve in your heart that slams shut and becomes a wall of the heart. And then the ductus arterius aortus closes, and the venous closes. All these, the ones to your liver, and the umbilical cord vein closes, the umbilical cord artery closes. All that has to shut off and pinch for you to live in air. And then that miracle, it has to happen the first time, because it's not, you can't get like 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 4. You have to get all of them right. And that's, if it doesn't work, you're not going to reproduce. You're not going to live. And this had to happen. This just came about over time. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Has anybody ever done this? You catch yourself doing whatever, skydiving or whatever you guys like to do in Nebraska. All right. It's a miracle in itself, because what if it just clotted up all the time? It clotted up when it shouldn't. It's got to clot only on the skin and not inside. Because if it clotted up too soon, you can't pump the blood. But if it didn't clot up at all, you're going to bleed to death. And this is, I'm going to give you some links or some websites that you can write down and go through and play with them and learn some of this. This is David Reeves.
Blood clotting requires what's called a cascade. This means that each step is vital for the next step. You can't skip a step in the cascade, as each one is dependent on the previous step. Now, the blood clotting cascade requires over 100 steps. Each step must be in place the first time an animal is cut, or it will slowly bleed to death. How did over 100 steps just happen to all be in place at the right time? Having half the steps is no good. Having 99 steps is no good.
Yeah, it had to be all there all at once, and this is supposed to just happen by chance. We don't have a clue what's happening. We just put a Band-Aid on and we go on with life. And if you want to see more of these, it's David Reeves Ministries. It's R-I-V-E-S, and he's on YouTube. And you go there and he's got these different channels or lists, and this is The Heavens Declare. And he's really good. And I've been at a museum, and I've asked this a couple of times, even at the park. I like I like to help them think. We're playing baseball at the park on Saturdays one time with the kids, and it was fun. And a bird comes flying and hits the back of a bench and drops there. And we all go look at it, and it's like, hey guys, where'd that bird come from? And he goes, from a nest. Yeah, but where'd that come from before that? You know, from another bird. And where did that bird come from? You know, we could have done that for millions of years. And then finally Ben said, God made it. And I said, that's right. God made the first bird. That's right. You're going to go to school and you're going to learn that it came from some, it came from some amoeba or fish or something. There's no evidence for that. It's not true. And so, what came first, the heart or blood cells? Oh, that's what I asked them too. What came first, the heart or blood cells? And they said, the heart. And so I said, well, what came, what good's a heart without blood cells? Oh, the blood cells. What good are blood cells without a heart? It had to be fully formed, fully functional. And I did the same thing at the Mastodon Museum at St. Louis. And then they started stalking me. I couldn't take pictures, I took a picture of their video, and he goes, you got to delete that. And so I go, okay. So anyhow, but it had to be, and I said, I'll give you that. You can have the first blood cells with the first heart in all this time, in this whole world, at the same time, at the same place. What good is that without lungs? What good is that without a nervous system or a digestive system? We have vital organs for a reason. How do you evolve vital organs? This has to be fully formed, fully functional, right from the get-go, or we're dead. And the most advanced machine on the planet, and yet they will tell you it had no designer. I don't have enough faith to believe we came together by chance. And they'll say, well, in all this universe, all these planets, the chances are we're just the lucky one. And I said, okay, so does that mean that someday you're going to open up your dryer with all the people in all the world washing their clothes, and it's going to open up and it's all going to be folded, and the socks are all going to be paired together without any missing? Is that going to happen? But yeah, they go to great lengths to keep their faith. So basically, it's irreducible complexity. If you have a car out there, you can take off the fenders, the lights, the windshields. It's still a car. It'll get you there. But if you take one of these things out of a mousetrap, it's not going to work. All those things have to be there. It's not going to work. And what good is half a mousetrap? And your body your cell is incredible. You need the DNA to make RNA, and you need the RNA to make proteins, and then the DNA is made of proteins, or you need the proteins to make DNA. It had to be fully formed, fully functional, right from the get-go. All right? And I spend a lot of time at St. Cloud State. They like me so much. And talking to students, they'll say, if I meet an evolutionist and they say, there's no God, I don't argue with them. I say, okay, have it your way. Without God, how did life begin? And they'll say, well, science has it figured out. And I said, no, they don't. You could have made $1 million if you could prove how life came from non-life. That was the Origin of Life Project, a secular organization. $1 million, 13 years, it's on the table, nobody could do it. And now it's $10 million. You want to make $10 million? Yeah, prove how the DNA information organizes itself naturally. $10 million. They don't have it all figured out. And sometimes that's what I hope for. I just try and help them see that they have faith too. They have faith in unknown processes where we have faith in God. And this one, oh man, this is getdebunked.org. This is Carl Kirby, getdebunked.org. Everybody got that? Getdebunked.org. And I play this on my Bluetooth speaker as students are walking back and forth to class. Okay, so just imagine this being played at a secular college.
Lots of people say there's no evidence for God. Well, we're going to knock that one out in 3. I'm just going to have to keep it simple, throw in the old 1-2 combo, get in and out real quick, and let you fine folks chat all about it, okay? Punch one I'm going to call the info uppercut. When's the last time you walked into a library and asked, hey, where are all the books that have been written by mindless products of natural laws? The librarian would probably laugh at you and tell you that no such books exist. And they don't exist because they can't exist. Why not? Because first of all, it's just common sense. The words that form the message in books always originate from a person with a brain. Or to say it a bit more scientifically, the message of the book, the purpose, comes to be understood by the orderly placement of the words, design, and information. Ah, information. Now, anytime we find info, these basic laws always apply. Number 1, matter doesn't spontaneously produce information. Number 2, only a mental source, intelligence, can generate new creative information. In other words, just like those books that couldn't originate without a mind, neither could life. Why not, you ask? Because we know that DNA contains information. Therefore, the laws of information science apply, which means the information in DNA couldn't have spontaneously generated, and that a mind is behind the information. Period. No exceptions. Look at it this way. The simplest life form we know of is an amoeba, and it contains as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. So, are we to believe that there's no way a message in a library book could spontaneously generate, but far more complicated messages in DNA that contain 1,000 times more information could have? Not likely. You see, when it comes to life or anything else that contains information, the laws of information science confirm the necessity of a creative mind. And guess what? In the very first book of the Bible, it just happens to mention that. In the beginning, God created. Bam! Uppercut lands on the chin. And now here comes the indefensible head blow. We'll call this the Nada Big Bang Bing swing, the KO to the claim that there's no evidence of God, the law of causality, left hook of doom. It goes like this. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. Now, either something caused the universe to come into existence, or nothing caused it. I might not be the smartest guy behind the telescope, but honest, practical, everyday thinking is going to lead me to the latter. You have to work pretty hard to conjure up a way that nothing did it. You see, it's pretty improbable, nigh impossible, to account for design, information, and cause if the universe just exploded from nothing. Smack! And while we're on the topic, where did the matter come from that exploded? Are we really to believe that there was nothing and then it exploded, and now the exploded nothing is something, and we just happen to be smart enough to discover and understand the very laws that prove the opposite? And if the general understanding of the law of cause and effect is true, how can matter come from a lesser cause like nothing? I mean, come on. I don't have a bunch of letters after my name, but even a monkey knows better. And yeah, I snuck in a couple of extra jabs in there, so sue me. Now for some parting words from our sponsor, the Bible. It tells us in Romans 1:20 that since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. It also says that people actually know the truth, but they reject it, which explains why even though there's overwhelming evidence that there is a God, evidence won't convince the unwilling. Sad but true. So there you have it. With just a couple of meaningful blows, the claim that there is no evidence for God is down for the count, amigos. In other words, it's been debunked. Adios.
Adios. So how'd you like to hear that going to class? And this is a link online so you can share it. So I've shared this on media Facebook pages. You know, if there's a tragedy like a shooting or something, they always try to steer it to gun control. And my question is, hey, did that kid learn that people were mutated animals in school? Did he learn that there's no God? And then I'll post and then I'll link it to that. So I'll frame the conversation in that direction, because beliefs have consequences. And if there is no God, well, that's a whole nother talk. But our DNA, this is the language of life, and a lot of boring stuff, but I just want you to understand how complicated it is. You know, your DNA is getting hundreds of trillions, it's got 100 trillions of cells and 3 billion base letters, and there's about 1 million DNA letters are damaged to a cell on a good day. So there's a DNA repair system putting together the DNA that's falling apart every day. So my question is, what evolved first, the DNA or the repair system? You notice how it has to be all there? And I don't really understand what's happening here, but it's complicated.
What you are about to see is DNA's most extraordinary secret: how a simple code is turned into flesh and blood. It begins with a bundle of factors assembling at the start of a gene. A gene is simply a length of DNA instructions stretching away to the left. The assembled factors trigger the first phase of the process, reading off the information that will be needed to make the protein. Everything is ready to roll. 3, 2, 1, go. The blue molecule racing along the DNA is reading the gene. It's unzipping the double helix and copying one of the 2 strands. The yellow chain snaking out of the top is a copy of the genetic message, and it's made of a close chemical cousin of DNA called RNA. The building blocks to make the RNA enter through an intake hole. They are matched to the DNA, letter by letter, to copy the A's, C's, T's, and G's of the gene. The only difference is that in the RNA copy, the letter T is replaced with a closely related building block known as U. You are watching this process called transcription in real time. It's happening right now in almost every cell in your body.
There's no way that came about by life or by chance. And you got this thing called the kinesin. How does it get the protein to go where it needs to go? It's this kinesin pulls it along these microtubules. And I saw that, and it's like, how does that microtubule know where to go? And my son saw it and says, where does it get the energy? And that's ATP synthase, where it's like an electric engine in there. It's got a modem and a motor and a statum and all that stuff. But anyway, when they look at the mitochondria DNA mutation rate, they would expect if we were here 50,000 years, we'd figure we'd have 300 mutations. But we haven't been. We've been after 6,000, that's what we would predict, and what is the actual? The actual fits the 6,000 for mitochondria Eve. And Ann Gibbons, she did a report on this, and she actually said it looks like the first woman was 6,000 years ago, but we know that can't be true, and then she went off and made it bigger. And the thing with, this is chirality. Notice your hands are not the same. They're mirror images. One's right-handed, one's left-handed, and they call that chirality. And this is a PhD guy. He owns patents. He understands chemistry and all that. And let's see what he has to say. You know, how random chance natural processes can create proteins with thousands of left-handed molecules. Proteins are all left-handed if you're alive. If you're dead, then it goes back to a 50-50 mix. And then also create DNA with billions of right-handed molecules. And it's like, how in the world does that happen? He says, the reality of chirality made more than any other evidence did more to convince me of the reality of the now all-powerful Creator. We are incredibly complex, folks. Incredibly. There's no way we came together by chance. Okay, pop quiz. What's the most complicated thing up here? Who thinks it's the flash drive? Who thinks it's the dime? Who thinks it's the cottonwood seed? Who thinks it's the acorn? Who doesn't know? Okay, all right. The dime. That's probably the simplest thing, right? Just a stamped metal. How long do you think it would take to evolve? Right? It's got information on it. Dead giveaway for intelligent design. You know, that flash drive's pretty complicated. I can't make it, but people can. Somebody can. How about that cottonwood seed? What's that going to turn into? Well, how about that acorn? Those things are life. People can't make that. And just think what God's designed. I think the most complicated thing is that, because it's smaller, is the cottonwood seed. What did God put in that cottonwood seed? He put in an excavation business to dig a hole so it has a place to go to root. He put in a lumber company. So, I mean, this is what it turns into. The one on the right is a cottonwood tree. The one on the left is an oak. And that oak will produce, 17,000 acorns every year. And then there's a chemical factory in there, changing the sunlight, using the sunlight to break open a water molecule into oxygen and something else. Incredibly designed, and then it makes itself. It is way more complicated than anything that we could ever come up with. And ICR.org, no, this is on YouTube, ICR, Institute for Creation Research. They've got 50 one-minute clips that explain a lot of things. And this happens to be the Fibonacci sequence. Has anybody ever know what this Fibonacci sequence is? Oh, there's some people excited to hear this. Here we go.
In the Fibonacci sequence, the first two numbers are 0 and 1, and each following number is the sum of the previous two numbers. As the sequence climbs, the ratio of two of its higher values nears the golden ratio, or phi. These special numbers often occur in nature, like in the spirals on a sunflower. The same patterns show up in the circular layers of a pine cone or pineapple, and in clusters of conifer needles. So, what does all this mean? Well, evolution can't explain the development of mathematical laws, but the Bible can. Scripture solves this mystery by pointing us to the truth of the intelligent Creator. God created all things, both visible and invisible, like math. So next time you have a math problem, remember the sunflower and praise God for all He has created.
And did you know you got a Fibonacci sequence in your hand? This is great. Just love it. And you look at these curves, it's like in a random process, how come they're all the same? And I'm thinking, this is God shouting, look at me, look at me. And so in your hand, take a look.
Finger bone lengths follow the proportions of the Fibonacci number sequence. The sum of the smallest two segments of a finger equals the length of the third, and the sum of the second and third equals the length of the fourth bone. Your hand is a mobile golden spiral, perfectly balancing strength and dexterity.
Golden spiral. Let's start looking for these golden spirals. And this is, let's see, from Gizmodo.com. They talk about the DNA. It's got the same, as small as we can look in a telescope, and you look at the DNA, it's got that same ratio. The DNA molecule measures 32 angstroms long by 20 angstroms wide for each full cycle. It's the double helix, and it's basically the Fibonacci series right there. And they got that same curve on shells and goat's horns and spider webs. You got that same thing. You zoom out a little bit farther, you got that same thing on a hurricane. And you zoom out way far, you got the same thing on a galaxy. And it says, spiral galaxy has appeared to defy Newtonian physics. As early as 1925, astronomers realized that since the angular speed of rotation of the galactic disk varies with the distance from the center, the radical arms should be curved as the galaxy rotates. Subsequently, after a few rotations, spiral arms should start to wind around a galaxy. But they don't. Yeah, it's not billions of years. These are brand new. Yeah, but they try to invent, they call it the winding problem. They try and throw dark matter into it to make it work, or dark energy. And so when we got the sunflower, the pine cone, and the number of petals, for any of you that like flowers, check this out. The number of petals in a flower consistently follow this Fibonacci sequence. Famous examples include the lily, which has 3 petals, buttercups, which have 5, the chinseri 21, daisy 34, and so on. And then it gives evolution the credit. Listen to this. Phi appears in petals on account of the ideal packing arrangements as selected by Darwinian processes. Darwinian processes do not select, but they try and squeeze it in there whatever they can. That's their God. They give them homage whenever they can, even though that doesn't make sense. Each petal is placed about whatever. Okay. And now we're going to move on to math. How about, who's ever heard of fractals? Fractals. This is a mathematical formula that's graphed out, and it looks exactly like what's in real life.
The Mandelbrot set of numbers reveals a secret code that went undiscovered for thousands of years. While mathematicians can plot this set by hand, today's computers show with great precision that beauty is built into numbers. And when you take a closer look at the Mandelbrot set, you see the pattern goes on without end. This is an example of a fractal, a type of structure that repeats infinitely on smaller and smaller scales. Snowflakes have a fractal quality. Why is this? The laws of nature responsible for snowflake formation are mathematical because they stem from the mind of God. Fractals occur both in math, which is abstract, not made of atoms, and the physical world, which is made of atoms, because they have the same designer. Lightning branches occur in a fractal pattern, and so does broccoli. If the universe was formed by chance, why would nature follow mathematical rules?
Yeah, exactly. Why would it? And Jason Lyle, anybody heard of Jason? He does such a good job. I love his logic tape, his logic lessons. He's really, really sharp and yet really understandable, and I enjoy watching him. The thing on the right is a fractal. The thing on the left is a fern. The thing on the right is just a mathematical formula being graphed out. And the same thing there. The thing on the, let's see, maybe I got this backwards. Same thing there. Why does a mathematical model follow such, make a design like that? And this is the evolutionist's worst nightmare. When you see a butterfly, you know, because butterflies, they start as an egg, they turn into a caterpillar. Caterpillars can't reproduce. They don't have any reproductive organs. They have to turn into a chrysalis and liquefy their whole body and put it all back together. And they can't, and then come out of the chrysalis. And they have to break their own way out of the chrysalis. If they're struggling and you help them, they can't fly anymore. The process of breaking it out squeezes the fluid from their body into the wings, which gives them the ability to fly. If they don't do that, then you hurt them. It's like John Wooden would tell his players, the best way to get something is to earn it. earn it. If you give somebody something that they should do for themselves, you hurt them. And so that caterpillar, it has to get all the way through. How does a butterfly evolve? You know what? If it gets 10% through the chrysalis, it's not gonna. It's dead. End of gene pool. 50% end of gene pool. 90% end of gene pool. Even 99% end of gene pool. It had to be fully formed, fully functional, right from the get-go, and it's designed like that. And all right, what's this? Platypus. Yeah. What's different about a platypus? Anybody know? Yes.
It's a mammal that lays eggs.
Mammal that lays eggs. Bingo. Very good. Anybody else? Anything else? What's different? If we evolved from common ancestors, what in the world? It's got a tail like a beaver, bill like a duck, fur like an otter, spurs like a rooster, webbed toes like watered birds, poison glands like reptiles, hollow spur like a viper tooth, lays eggs like a bird, echolocation like dolphins, sonar like whales, short legs like reptiles, makes nests like a bird, leathery eggs like turtles, babies have teeth like mammals, leathery bill unlike any other animal, and totally unique electrical sensors, different from sharks and rays. What was the common ancestor there? Yeah, I think God just made that to make evolution look really stupid. There's this other video that I play at St. Cloud State. This is from ScienceUprising.com. This is a poster out there. And what does it say? Enjoy something about the intolerance. Enjoy the freedom to think outside the intolerant dogma of evolution. And so we show these videos at St. Cloud State, and this is just a trailer.
Modified monkeys? Is that what we are? Or is it just a mask some scientists want us to wear?
The origin of life community has not been honest.
Materialists understand that materialism cannot explain the mind.
Who am I?
Rather than abandoning materialism, they abandon the mind.
Our planet has water and carbon, both necessary for life. So the Earth is exceedingly rare.
You get many people deceived, thinking that life has been all but made.
We come from the way. Out of sphere, show you the way. Out of here.
There exists a code so complex and advanced that it defies the probability of chance.
When we see information in software and we trace that information back to its source,
out of sphere, show you the way.
we always come to a mind as part of what we know from our observation of the world around us, that information always arises from an intelligent source.
And so I would play that on my Bluetooth speaker at St. Cloud State too, and they've got 7, now I think they have 8 different segments, the origin of life, the origin of DNA, and different segments through different topics. And I'll play the whole thing there. And one time a student came up to me and says, "Man, that was interesting." And we played it. We started a creation club in St. Cloud, and we were showing we meet at the public library, and we showed this one day. And it was in January, and a homeless guy comes in, Damien, and he couldn't believe I was showing this at a secular, at the library. So he was just laughing. And we became really good friends, actually. And then another guy came in, and he goes, "What's going on here?" Because I had that poster outside. And I said, "We're just showing creation clips." And he goes, "I'll be back." And so he comes back with his friend. And so I played him the origin of life, which just can't happen, and the origin of DNA, which just can't happen. And then his friend didn't look real happy. And as they're getting up and they're leaving, the first guy says to me, "If this is true, that raises some interesting questions." And I said, "It most certainly does." And so that's what we do. We just get the evidence out there. And this is the Discovery Institute out in Seattle, I think, and they're intelligent design proponents. They won't say God, but there's some good arguments that God exists. Debunkevolution.com. Anybody ever heard of Lucy? Our supposed ape-like ancestor? Well, did you ever see how they found Lucy, how they put her together, what Lucy's actually made of? Oh, wait, I'll give that, you can take it, yep. Debunkevolution.com. And these are all websites you can go through and just have fun at it. Just learn what you can. It's really a fun way to learn the topics. I mean, there's some science journals out there. Oh my, it's going to take hours to get through an article. This is a lot more fun. And so here we go.
How do you go from hundreds of bone fragments to 47 skeleton bones to a missing link that supposedly lived 3 million years ago named Lucy? In school textbooks across the country, Lucy is represented as a clear ape to human transition, walking upright, holding babies, and gazing intelligently as she walks. This teaching sows seeds of doubts in the minds of Christian students, leading them to believe that the biblical creation account is based on far-fetched fantasies. But is this really true? Is Lucy really our early human ancestor? Well, let's take a look at the evidence from head to toe. Made of hundreds of bone fragments glued together to make 47 parts, even accidentally including a vertebrae from a different species, do we really know what she was? Her skull, inner ears, locking wrist, curved fingers, and short legs reveal that she was definitely an ape. But that's not what evolutionists want you to think. Shown with human expressions, eye whites, which no apes have, and walking upright, they want you to think she was on her way to becoming human. The truth is, we were created in the image of God, and not in the image of apes, out of the dust of the earth, and given the dominion charge to rule over all of God's creation. That's why we put apes in the zoo, and not the other way around. We sing, worship, have ceremonies, pray, educate ourselves, and do so many other things that reflect the fact that we are spiritual beings and not animals. See more on this topic and others at debunkevolution.com.
Debunkevolution.com, Genesis Apologetics, they have some really good stuff. And that brings us to one of the biggest clues. This is the one, fossils. So I'm going to send these around. Your job is to figure out which one is a petrified tree and which one is a dinosaur bone. And then there's a rock coming the other way, and it's a mystery rock. I found it by my garage. Whoops. It's a mystery rock. I want you to try and figure out what it is, okay? So we'll just see. We'll have a vote at the end. So we'll see how good of detectives you are. But fossils are an incredible clue. That's what really got me when I heard the age of the earth. He says fossils are a sign of a flood, not millions of years. You know, that deer on the side of the road, that's not turning into a fossil. It's going to get scavenged, it's going to decompose, it's going to be gone. The only way you get a fossil is if it's buried rapidly. Therefore, every layer that has fossils was laid down rapidly, not over millions of years. And I really like how Answers in Genesis does this. It's called, you go into answersingenesis.com and then search check this out, or it's under media or somewhere. And this is one of them.
Now this one I've heard quite a bit. The fossil record speaks for itself and it proves evolution. Really? Well, first of all, evidence like the fossil record doesn't speak for itself. It's interpreted through a person's worldview, like looking through a lens. We all have the same evidence in the present, the same rock layers, the same fossils, etc., and we interpret this evidence in regard to the past through the lens, or worldview we use. An evolutionist will interpret the evidence through the lens of what he's been taught about evolution in millions of years, but a biblical creationist will interpret the same fossils differently through the lens of the Bible. Now, both are looking at the same evidence in the present, but both are interpreting it very differently. So looking at the fossil record in the present, because that's all we have, and interpreting it through the lens of God's Word, we find that what we actually observe in the present confirms the interpretation obtained by looking through the lens of the Bible. Now, the only meaningful place to start is with the word of someone who has seen everything from the beginning and told us exactly what happened. That someone is God, who has given us a written account of the world's true history in the Bible. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Now, God's written word tells us that during creation week, God created different kinds of animals and plants according to their kinds. The implication is that they will produce after their kind. That's exactly what we see today, isn't it? An elephant produces an elephant, a dog produces a dog, and on and on. Now on the sixth day, man and woman, Adam and Eve, were also created, and God declared everything very good. It was complete and perfect, and there was no death because there was no sin. Later on in Genesis chapter 3, it is revealed that the man and woman, being tempted by the serpent, rebelled against God, broke his command, and sin and corruption entered the world. In fact, the entire creation was altered and is no longer in its originally perfect, very good state. People and animals began to die. But could gradual death in such a short period of time account for the fossil record we observe today? Not only that, to form a fossil, the animal or plant has to be covered quickly. And since we find billions of fossils all over the world today, something that could have killed billions of things rather quickly had to have occurred. Not to mention, we also find many fish and other marine fossils at the tops of today's mountains. So, What in the Bible could account for that? What could cause billions of dead things to be buried in rock layers rapidly laid down by water all over the earth? Well, flip to Genesis chapter 6 through 9 and you'll read the account of the global flood in Noah's day. Essentially what happened is that men were so corrupt and violent that God selected a righteous man, Noah, and his family to build a huge ark and get in it along with a pair of each land animal kind. And then God caused a worldwide flood. The water gushed up from the ground, and water fell from the sky. The earth was totally covered with water, and all land-dwelling, air-breathing creatures outside the ark were killed. All of them. It was a massive and destructive event. After more than a year, the waters had subsided enough that Noah and his family and the animals could get off the ark. Now, what would a worldwide flood do to the earth? Well, far too many things to discuss here, but it would have definitely totally changed the earth's terrain. It would have tossed things all around, and it would have destroyed billions of plants and animals, burying them all over the earth. So based on the biblical worldview, we know that God created everything and it was perfect. But because of man's rebellion, people became corrupt and all kinds of things began to suffer and die. Because of man's continual violence and corruption, God destroyed all people and all other land-dwelling, air-breathing creatures in the world, save Noah, his family, and representatives of all land-dwelling, air-breathing animal kinds, with a global, catastrophic deluge. The fossil record that we observe today makes perfect sense within the biblical worldview. Now I could go on, but enough said.
It reminds me of Jerry's story that today, when he was going through his dissertation and he said, science is putting all the options on the table, young and old, and then looking at the data and determining which ones fits the data better. And but that's not the case in a lot of places, and that's a tragedy. It's hurting science dramatically. And this is from ICR.org. You go ICR.org, go under media and under video.
Do fossils really show that creatures gradually evolved from simple to complex? The late fossil expert and evolution defender Stephen Gould recognized they didn't. He said the fossil record shows two clear features. One, sudden appearance, and two, stasis. When a new creature is discovered in the fossil record, it shows up suddenly and fully formed, with no gradual forms that led up to it. That's sudden appearance. Then its basic form stays the same. It doesn't evolve. And that's stasis. All kinds of fossilized creatures show sudden appearance and stasis, including creatures like crinoids, mosasaurs, beardworms, horseshoe crabs, lobsters, and trilobites. Rather than gradual evolution, the fossil record shows each animal form suddenly appears. Trilobites have perfectly formed body parts right from the start. They show up suddenly with no ancestors and have some of the most complex eyes that ever existed on Earth. Does that sound like slow, gradual evolution? They first occur in Cambrian rocks, which often represent the first deposits from Noah's flood. But even when found high above Cambrian rocks, trilobites still look like trilobites, as though they were created to reproduce more of their own kind. In The Origin of Species, Charles Darwin hoped future fossil finds would show examples of in-between creatures demonstrating evolution. So far, it's just more stasis. Creatures appear suddenly, fully formed, and they keep the same form. And that's what we'd expect to find. God's fully formed creation we read about in the book of Genesis.
Fully formed, fully functional. So what you have in the fossil record are either animals that are still alive or animals that are extinct. There's no transitional anything. And actually with the fossil record, the stuff's bigger. Is the small one's the modern one, the big one is the fossil one. They figured that fossil beaver was 8 feet long and 400 pounds. They had some big trees back then before the flood. And this is one of my heroes, Dr. Carl Werner. When he was in med school, a classmate, they're having pizza, and a classmate asked him, "Hey, what do you think of evolution?" He says, "I believe it." He said, "Well, what do you think of the problems with the Big Bang and the laws of physics?" He goes, "Oh, I didn't realize there were problems with the Big Bang. Matter coming from nothing, first law of thermodynamics." And then the guy says, "Well, what about the transitional fossils that should have been found but haven't been found?" He goes, "Oh, I didn't realize they haven't been found." And he goes, "And how does life begin if proteins don't form naturally?" And this guy's about as sharp as they come, the 99th percentile. And he understands biology, and he understands chemistry, and he understands, proteins don't form naturally. And by the way, do you know what you call someone who graduated at the bottom of his med school class? Doctor. Very good. Very good. Yeah, but that's not this guy. He's at the 99 percentile. And the student said, "Well, I bet you can't prove evolution true." And he goes, oh, it's got to be true. Yeah, you're on, you know. I mean, it's everywhere. But in science, you don't prove something true till you falsify it. If it can be false, then it's not true. And so when he got through med school and he's got more time and more finances, he says, yeah, I'm going to prove evolution true or falsify it. So he said his hypothesis was if evolution is false, then the modern animals will look identical to the fossil ancestors. If evolution is false, evolution didn't occur and they should look identical. And then understand, every animal has a scientific name, Latin for genus and species. Okay, so there's the species and then there's the kind of animal. Who thinks these are the same species? Anybody? Who thinks they're the same kind? Well, guess what? They're both the same species, Canis familiaris. Anybody know what that is? Dog, that's right. You got the Irish Wolfhound with the long snout, and you got the Bulldog with the pushed-in snout, and they're the same species. So you can have that much variety within a species. And then he went to the museum and he saw this fossil shrimp look identical to the modern shrimp. And he thought, and notice the red words there, the words in red, that's their scientific word. They think it's different genus, different species. And he thought, well, maybe that scientist just had a bad day, and he started to compare more things. And he took 60,000 pictures he traveled over 100,000 miles to get these pictures and compare them. Do those look the same? They look like the same animals? Scientists don't think so because one's modern and one's fossil. Same thing here. They look identical, but the scientists said, no, they're not. They're not the same animal, but different genus, different species. And he did a whole book on this called Evolution, Living Fossils. And it just goes on and on and on and on. They're identical. Why don't scientists call them the same animal? Because they're biased. They think, well, that thing couldn't have lived for millions of years. And it just goes on and on. Okay, anybody know what this is? Jellyfish. Good. How'd you know that? Yeah, it's a jellyfish. How long is a jellyfish going to lay on the stand? How long is that going to be there the next day? Or that footprint? Is that going to be there the next day? We went through ICR, and they got this fossil jellyfish. They got it specifically because Darwin said it couldn't fossilize. He said only things with hard parts can fossilize. But this had to be buried rapidly. And then on those footprints, they find huge dinosaur footprints in the Scottish coast. Sauropod bones and footprints have been found all over on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. Footprints. And if Dr. Galuza was here in his class, he'd say, Professor, excuse me, what modern process today is preserving footprints on every continent? You know, it had to be something worldwide, had to be catastrophic. And that brought us down to Glen Rose, Texas. That's a special place in my life. They've got this place called Dinosaur Valley State Park. Anybody ever been there? Okay, well, 100-some years ago, the Paluxy River, there was a flood, and it ripped off a layer of bedrock. Okay, and it revealed dinosaur footprints. And those, I took that picture. You can see the dinosaur footprints in the river. And I liked staying in the river because I figured the rattlesnakes are on the shore, right? Do snakes go in the river? Do snakes go in water? Who thinks snakes go in water? Let's see. Oh boy, who thinks snakes do not go in water? Okay, I'm the only idiot. Because I thought if I stay there, I'll be fine. But it turns out, so I went swimming and stuff, and then as I'm leaving, it's like there's a snake swimming around out there. It's like, ooh, God must have been watching. But anyway, there's dinosaur footprints, but hundreds of some years ago, guess what else there was? Human footprints. And you can talk to Jerry, he excavated one of these. And yeah, human footprints. So how are evolutionists going to get around that? Oh, it must have eroded. Didn't happen. Okay. Oh, and they're huge. This Roland T. Bird from 1930 in the American Field Museum reported 15 to 20 inch long, clearly defined human footprints with the dinosaur tracks. Clearly defined. I got an 11-inch foot. I'm around 6 feet tall. 15 to 20 inch. That's a big guy. Yeah, that's a really big guy, and we'll come back to that later. But how do evolutionists say that? Well, if it didn't evolve, somebody must have carved him in the bottom. And so this Taylor guy, he saw where the path disappeared into the riverbank, and he moved the riverbank, and he found like 6 more human-like footprints under the riverbank. So now they've protected the riverbank. You can't do that anymore. It's conservation. But so it proved they weren't carved. These were legit, and they used to have signs. You know, giant men tracks. And I encourage people to go listen to Carl Baugh, search him out on, if you can, get down to, this is south of Dallas, about 30 miles, and go to this Creation Evidence Museum. We've got a copy of this out there. That's Glen Rose, Texas. And they said, well, somebody must have carved that human print. And so they cut the heel. And you can't, when you step in mud, you make compression ridges. They cut the heel and they found compression ridges, so it was obviously not carved. So they said, well, somebody just carved toes on a dinosaur foot. And so they cut the toes. And guess what? More compression ridges. And the Dallas lab went out there, and they said, these are human footprints. But again, clearly 15 to 20 inch, clearly defined. The Bible says there were giants in the earth in those days. And these were the giants, I believe. And there was a giant that lived last century, 100 years ago. Anybody heard of Robert Wadlow from Alton, Illinois? He lived to be 8 feet 11 inches. He never stopped growing. He just kept growing his whole life. 439 pounds. You know, he had an 18.5-inch foot. And he was the tallest Boy Scout when he was 13. 7'4", 270 pounds. It's like Shaquille O'Neal. And if kids would give him a hard time, he'd just take their hat and he'd put it up on top of the fluorescent lights, you know. He was a gentle giant from what they say. And he must have had a heck of a time playing hide and seek, you know, and they take a picture. Now, where's Bob? Oh, there he is, you know. And so, again, they found these, and I encourage you to listen to Don Patton. Don Patton or Carl Baugh. You know, I've got a list of liked videos. You can go through them on my website. And they found this one. It was just perfect. And he presented it in Tennessee at a symposium or somewhere. And the next day there was somebody out there taking a iron bar to it and destroying it. And this is a dinosaur footprint on a human, stepped on a human print. And this is at the Creation Evidence Museum also. And this one they didn't have to cut to see if there were compression ridges. They could do some x-ray, and there were compression ridges. So these are legit. Dinosaurs and humans did live at the same time. How else could we carve them or make pictographs? You know, that's a whole other talk. But these are to do Don Patton and Carl Baugh. Extraordinary evidence that dinosaurs lived with man. Listen to him. And there's some creation organizations that say don't talk about it. It's like, hey, if there's information, I hate censorship. I've learned that a lot. And you know, just search it, listen to the people, and see how their arguments stand up. And then Carl Baugh, he excavated one. And he couldn't sleep for 4 nights. 3 or 4 nights, because he was a theistic evolutionist. He believed in millions of years, and he found a footprint there. And it just didn't make sense. But then he was intellectually honest, and he became a creationist in a young earth. And he's speaking at the Grace Conference near Chicago. If anybody wants to have a good conference, it's really good. It's at Quinton Road. It's called, go into graceconference.com. And I really enjoy listening to interviews on RSR. Remember I talked about Real Science Radio? You can listen to Bob interview Don Patton. And it's incredible. They also found at Glen Rose a human finger, fossilized. So they cut it in half, and the bone was where it should have been, right in the middle. We talked about the hammer. Brian did such a good job. I can't add anything to that. Actually, I'm going to steal all his info for the next talk. And we've got dinosaurs carved on Ica stones from about 1,000 years ago. And they've done it scientifically. They've proven that those are old, you know, and Triceratops. And then we talked about, let's see, Jerry talked about this one. And then they've got this in Arches National Park. Yeah, they've got a pictograph of a long-necked dinosaur. And I heard one of our creation speakers, I think it was Jay Seifert or somebody, said that I think it was Mike Snavely, went out to that Arches Park and he said, hey, where's that pictograph? And they said, what pictograph? He said, the pictograph on the side of the thing. And they said, no, it doesn't exist. We don't know what you're talking about. He said, really? So then he's walking to his car, somebody came out of the back of the building and they said, that's class 3 information. What do you mean class 3? And he said, yeah, you got class 1 is for the public, class 2 is for the educator, and class 3 is the one that nobody sees. So they're trying to sweep it under the rug because it goes really hard against their theory. And I love this one. Darwin's arch collapses in the ocean. It collapses. Arches are collapsing all over the place. And I got a question, what present process is making them? You know, if it's all uniformitarian, you know, there should be some process making them, and it doesn't. You know, we've got caves that form rapidly. It's kind of interesting that Carlsbad, anybody ever been to Carlsbad? Okay, did you see any of these signs? Let's see, from 1924 to 1988, there was a sign that said it took 260 million years to make, and then in 1988 they changed it to read 7 to 10 million years. A little while later it was 2 million years, and today it's gone. It says it depends on the flow of water, all right? And the TP fountain, anybody ever been to Thermopolis? Okay, there's a rock garden. The guy puts a pipe out the rock. The water just comes out of the ground there. He's got a rock garden, puts the water pipe up there, and within 100 years, that's what he got. Bunch of limestone. Yeah, it doesn't take long for mineral forms to form. Okay, does anybody know what this is? Anybody? A tree stump. Yeah, what kind of tree stump? What? A big one, a granite? Yeah, it's I asked him, and the kid said, a willow? It's a petrified tree. And you don't get to see petrified trees a lot, so we're gonna, yeah, that's a petrified tree. That's the inside petrified tree. If you want to go see one, you can look in a book, or you can go to a museum, or you can go to this place in the Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota, and you can go there. That's our Hotel Marriott. There's no fence between us and that bison. And this is the front door of Hotel Marriott. And you take a hike, I forget how long, maybe a couple miles, and you go through this fence. And now you go where the bison are supposed to be, and you stomp around, and you can see this ridge where those petrified trees are. And you notice that layered sediment and the stump there? That's real similar to Specimen Ridge in Yellowstone and what's happening in Spirit Lake. But you notice the layers, you notice the stumps, and it's just amazing. This thing turns to rock. And if you want, you can go into Yellowstone. Anybody been to Yellowstone? Okay, good. You see that? Did you see the petrified tree? Okay, did you stop at this place? I went there and I said, hey, where can I see otters? And they said, Trout Lake. And they said, we only tell people like once a month about that. They don't want it to get overrun, so just keep this under your hat. All right? Or you guys keep it on your hat. So it's Spirit Lake. It's really cool. You think I'm zooming in on that thing? No, there we are. He's right there eating a trout. It's, yeah, and it's, what's happened is they dammed up a river in the trout stream. The trout are going up spawning, so you can watch these coyotes rip them out of there. And let's see, we did Mount St. Helen. We can skip that. Yeah, Brian did such a good job on that. And kids, do you think you can handle? Yeah, the scariest fossil out there, right? This is a fossil hat. It was left in a cave, and it was closed down, and they opened up the cave, and there it was. And now this is the scariest fossil. Do you guys, kids, do you think you can handle this? You aren't going to get nightmares? Can you handle scary things, kids? Parents? Maybe you want to close your eyes? Here we go. All right, you ready? Fossil teddy bear. You can make them by hanging them in a cave, and the water runs over, and it turns them into that. Or else maybe the dinosaurs, they slept with them, you know, maybe. This one proves that it happened rapidly. This is a ichthyosaur giving birth. You know, is that a millions of years thing? The blood cells we touched on, which was really, really interesting. And how about this? Off the coast of Iceland, we are going to see this. There's an island. How old do you think that island is? Billions of years, yeah, right. It had started in 1963. There was a volcanic eruption. Yeah, I think it was 1963, yeah. A brand new island that formed off the coast of Iceland, 1963. So, if you're born before 1963, you are actually older than those hills. You actually are. Yeah, and that's not me, so I can say you're older than the hills. Not me. But it's a geographer's marvel that canyons, gullies, and other land features that typically take tens of thousands or millions of years to form were created in less than a decade. Is that in the textbooks? I look at a lot of textbooks. It's not in there, you know, and so it just goes up, and it's got wide sandy beaches. It's beyond, what does it say? For what is said to take thousands of years, the same development may take place in a few weeks or even a few days. A landscape so varied and mature that it would almost beyond belief. Wide sandy beaches. All right, and so there it is. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to maybe even end a little bit sooner here. Yeah, we'll just kind of wind this down a bit. Again, you notice how I listen with my eyes? Who's coming back next year? Who do you think is going to come back next year? Okay, what are you going to do between now and then? You going to make a difference? And I encourage people to take this information and share it. You know, if you went to med school your whole life, you didn't become a doctor, you know, what good is it? My wife said, you'd be in a lot of debt. A lot of debt. Yeah, you certainly would be. And so there's certain things that you can do. You're going to buy birthday gifts, right? You're going to buy Christmas gifts, right? I encourage you to get some of those magazines that are out there. Creation.com has an excellent magazine for kids and everybody. And it's, you know, there's science journals out there that'll take you a week or two to read. Or you can just get the most, and that's just a few topics. Or you can go into creation.com, get their magazine, and you get a big overview and color pictures, a kids section. Give that away for Christmas or birthdays. That's what we do for our nieces, nephews. We're trying to help them solidify their faith in the Bible by looking at God's creation. And then the other thing you can get is rsr.org. You can get a whole DVD of their shows, a year of shows for $35. And that's what I did on the way down, 8 hours, listening to RSR. And it's so much fun. You know, it's just, and Bob Enyart's just got such a way with words. You know, if you start with nothing plus nothing equals everything, there's no amount of mistakes you're going to make. You know, there's no limit to the wrong thinking you'll have. And that's a good source. And just start voting with your money. The world has enough of our money. Just think if all the Christians just boycotted everything ungodly. Down goes Hollywood. You know, down goes those corporations like Starbucks that funds Planned Parenthood. And just start voting with their money for Christians and support, you know, those godly ministries, especially those doctors that are putting their neck on the line. And this we have, it's a DVD we got out there. There's 3 of my talks on there, and it's not your dinosaur talk, it's not your science talk. And again, we have enough information. What are we doing with it? They're motivational talks. The first 2 are anyway. One is Behind Enemy Lines, where we take a look at the situation, the mission, and the execution of what needs to be done. What's the situation? Our kids are falling away from the church at a rate of 67 to 90%. And it's mainly because they doubt the Bible's true, and they began to doubt it in junior high and high school when they're being taught the dogma of evolution. And the Big Bang. And that's a religion. It's telling us where we came from, what we are, and where we're going. Talk about separation of church and state. They should get, so I believe, I'm kind of old-fashioned, I think science should teach science. Not an unsubstantiated belief system about the past, which is what evolution is. If you can't test it, you shouldn't teach it. You know, if millions of years, billions of years, and that's your baloney detector going off, millions of years, billions of years, there's no evidence for that at all. I'd love to see people start suing the state and get the billions of years off those landmarks. And that's a belief system. You know, and yeah. And so that's the situation. What's the mission? We got to get people equipped with creation. And I encourage every community to start a creation club. You know, just, you know, show a movie. All you need is a place to show a movie. And we've got a church in town that does that now. And so we're inviting people, and one guy's so excited to come. It's like, this is brand new to some people. Some people say, creation, it's old hat. But I was almost 40 and never heard of it. Thank God my cousin sent me a video. That's something you can do. Get some videos, send them out. You know, and a lot of my stuff's on YouTube if it's not censored. But the censored shows up on Rumble. I got that out there. So that's the first one. The second one is Get in the Game. And I guarantee you never heard that one before. It's a halftime talk, and we play Pictionary. And then the last one is me at a state college in Florida. They gave a microphone to a creationist at a state college. That's a story in itself, and it was so much fun. So I encourage you to get it. You know, if you like it, great. If you don't like it, give it to someone you don't like, you know. It might help them. All right, so with that, I think we'll do a quick prayer, you know, and then there's the later session tonight. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus, and we do thank you so much for an opportunity to look at your word. We do pray that these seeds that have been planted would produce abundant fruit, and that you would bring people people into their lives and direct their paths and their actions, and help us to live in a manner worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Help us to expose the lies of the enemy, and help us to be bold, and help us to live in a way that's pleasing to you. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, thanks, Brian.